Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm talking to you about why your home sewn garments just don't look good. I've got 8 mistakes that we're going to go through, and if you address each one of those then you will have a really professional finished garment at the end of your project. So the first mistake you're making is that you're not using either the right fabric or you're using a really cheap fabric. Now it can be really tempting when we're first sewing to just use cheap fabrics. We tell ourselves we're not very good, so we don't want to spend lots of money on fabric. There are shops online that cater to cheap fabrics and you can buy them as little as £1 a metre or $1 a metre. But that's not going to serve you very well. Now, as a beginner, I wouldn't suggest you go and buy a fabric that's £30 a metre, but you can go a little better than £1 a metre. So I think for me, I would be looking at £7 or £8 a metre. You can have all the skills in the world. You don't need to be a beginner, but if you're using really bad materials, then the end product isn't going to look good no matter what it is, whether it's sewing, art, crochet, whatever. You need a good foundation. Think about if you're building a house, you wouldn't use really poor materials in the foundation if you wanted that house to last. If you were building that house just to last 10 or 20 years, then maybe you would, but the house is not going to survive 100 years with really poor materials. Think about that when you are approaching your projects. Over time, you're going to train yourself to understand what a good fabric is and what a good fabric isn't. I find it very hard to put into words what it is, but I know when I go in a shop and I feel a fabric, I can feel quality. And it's just something you're going to pick up over time. You know, you've got clothes that you've bought dirt cheap. Have a feel of those to see what that fabric is like and compare that to the fabric of a quality garment, and you will get some kind of understanding. And then the other part of this tip is that you need to be choosing the right fabrics for the right garments. So when we start to sew, we find a pattern, we look at the back, it might say cotton poplin. You might think that, oh, I've got this fabric, it's a kind of the same weight as the fabrics they're saying on the pattern, that do. No, not necessarily, because there's so much more that goes into a fabric choice other than your weight. You want the give of the fabric as well. You want the weight, you want the flow. There's so much more into it. So my advice is that when you're first sewing, you really want to pay attention to what the pattern is telling you to use and stick to what they're saying. Once you're more experienced, you will know, the experienced among you will know that you can just deviate from that because you know what you're doing a bit more. But in the beginning, as a beginning sewer, if you are choosing the wrong fabrics or cheap fabrics, then your garment is not going to look good. It's going to look subpar. The next mistake you're making is that you do not cut your fabric correctly or you do not sew accurately. So that's kind of 2 in 1 there. Let's go to the first part first. So when we are cutting our fabric, it can be quite tempting to go kamikaze with the scissors, but you really don't want to do that. You want to pay attention to the pattern. I'm guessing, I've got cat hair everywhere. I am guessing that you have cut out your pattern or you've printed your pattern off. You must make sure that you are cutting that pattern correctly, because then once you cut that pattern, you're going to be cutting the fabric. And if you've got the wrong seam allowance or you don't cut accurately, it's going to show up in your garment. If you've cut the pattern specifically and then you cut your fabric, but it's not laid flat, it's maybe a bit creased, you haven't ironed it, maybe you haven't even washed it, because then it will shrink in the wash after you've made your garment. But specifically for this tip, you need to make sure everything is in place correctly. You've done everything the pattern tells you to, if indeed it gives you all the instructions you need. But you need to make sure your fabric is flat. It is folded on its natural fold. So you've got to look at the warp and the weft, but we're not going to get into that now. And then when you cut it, you've got to cut it accurately. Even if you're like an 1/8 off or a 1/16 off, when you've got 4 sides, so like you've got the front side, you've got the back side, front side, back side, you take an 1/8 off of each of those and you're going to have a smaller size. And then further to that, you have to make sure you're sewing accurately. I can't talk on this one. I'm really bad at accurate sewing. I just go like that, and I've paid the price more than once or twice. So I'm here to tell you, don't do that. You really want to pay attention to where you should be sewing, the seam allowance. You've got a grid on your sewing machine. It's there for a reason. Use it. If you struggle to sew in a straight line, there are things you can do. You could put an elastic band around your throat plate, or you could get a magnetic seam allowance. You could even draw the seams on your fabric, which would make you super, super accurate. But similarly to if you cut inaccurately, say you cut an 1/8 of an inch too short or too small, if you sew in that same way, it's going to have the same effect. And also, if your seams are done really, really well, then your garment's going to look better. And not only is it going to look better, it's going to last a lot longer. So the next tip I have for you, the next mistake you're making, is that you do not test out techniques before you dive in. So if you're a new sewer, you might have a pattern where you've got to do a buttonhole for the first time, or you might have to do a pocket, or you might have to do your neckline. If you're doing a jersey, you'll have to put a neck piece in. Wow. What we tend to do as beginners is just follow the advice and just do it and hope for the best. I'm talking from experience here. This is what I used to do, and it caused so many mistakes. It held me back so far. If I'd just taken 10 minutes to get a little piece of scrap fabric and have a practice at what it was asking me to do, when I come to make my actual garment, I'm going to have a much better end result, and it's going to look so much more professional. Just practicing it once or twice is going to really upscale your skills in that technique. It's going to be the difference between a shoddy top or bottoms or whatever you're sewing and a really well-made one. If you're liking these tips so far, do leave me a comment down below. Let me know what mistakes you made and have learned from. Share your knowledge in the community so we can all learn from each other. And hit that subscribe button while you're down there. So the next mistake we're making is that we do not make twirls or make any kind of adaptations. So this tip is in my element, because if you've watched me for any length of time, you know my love-hate relationship with twirls. So if you don't know, a twirl is a practice garment. So you make it, like, you don't finish it, you don't do all the finishes, you just sew the main bits of it, try it on, and then see if it fits, make adaptations before you're sewing your actual garment. That way you're not wasting your fabric. Because I get that question quite a lot, what is a twirl? So I just thought I would explain that. So as beginners, we pick up a pattern and we think that pattern is bespoke for us. We think we can look at the size we need, choose the size, cut out the pattern, cut out the fabric, sew it, job's a good one. No, no, no. That's not what a pattern is. So if you are new to sewing, you need to really understand that a pattern is a template, and it's a generic template. Patterns are sold to thousands and thousands of people, so they have to make the actual like shape and what have you of the pattern piece. I can't speak. They have to make it to fit the most people as possible. So if you have got a body type that is slightly outside of the box, outside of the norm, then it's not going to fit you straight out of the packet. And especially if you're plus size, then that is something that's definitely not going to fit you, and you're definitely going to need adaptations. You can choose a size and you can make it up as is, but it's going to be a really, really poor fit. For example, I've lost a bit of weight now, but when I was much bigger, my shoulders didn't get bigger. They just stayed exactly, well, what they are now is essentially what they stayed. But when pattern companies make patterns and they size up the shoulders. So if I made it up as is, it would look like a rugby player's top. So I couldn't do that. So I needed to do 12s to make sure that I was getting the shoulder seam just where I needed it. Because also I've got quite a small upper chest here, and I would have lots of gaping here. Added to that, I would have sleeves where my arms were big. They're not small yet, but they're getting there. My arms were big, so the bicep never fitted, and things like that. So you really need to learn to do that. And if you want a quality garment, then you need to do 12s. You know, if you're a viewer of mine, that you have seen me make 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 12s for one garment. But by the end of that process, the garment fits me perfectly and I can make it over and over again without worrying about any further adaptations. What do rich people do when they go to tailors? They have clothes that are made specifically for them. So the tailor will take measurements, the inside leg, etc., to ensure that they can make a garment that is specifically for their body. And that's what you're looking to do when you're making your own clothes, if you want a high-end garment. So the next mistake you're making is that you're not pressing as you sew. So this is something I've spoken about before, and I don't advocate you sew one seam, you press it, you sew another seam, you press it. Who's got time for that? No one, not me, that's for certain. But what I will do is batch sew and batch press. I'll go through the pattern, sew as many bits as I can until I come to a point where I have to sew across a previous stitch that I've sewn. At that point, it's time to go over to the iron and press your seams. Now, we're not ironing our seams like you would iron your clothes. You are pressing, so you're putting the iron down and lifting it up. Iron down, lifting it up. So by doing that, you're not distorting the fabric before you've actually sewn the garment. And it's really, really important. I always will press my seams closed first to lock them in, and then I will press the seam open. So it can be really easy to get lazy as the project goes on, to not do this, to think we'll just press it at the end. That's not going to work for you if you want a high-end garment, because it is just going to look shoddy. It's going to look like you haven't put any effort into it. If you compare really low-end garment shops, like in the UK we have Primark, places like that. If you compare them to much higher-end garments or even designer garments, you are going to see a difference. And that is in part because they haven't pressed as they've sewn on the cheaper end ones. Promise you, try it on one project and see if I'm right. So the next mistake you're making to why your garments look bad, and this one's for looking bad on the inside, is you don't finish your seams correctly. So I had a few garments actually when I first started sewing that I thought, oh, I don't even need to finish my seams. And how long do you think those garments lasted? Not very long. There is an idea that no one sees the inside of our garments, so what does it really matter? In terms of construction, it matters a lot. And actually in terms of how it looks, because you yourself are going to see that garment, you want to be proud of the work that you have done. So you want to always take care to finish the seams on the inside. I see finishing seams as an integral part of the sewing process. It's not something that you can dismiss just because people are not seeing it. No, you have to make sure that you are finishing your seams. If you don't want to put a lot of effort into it, you could pink the seams. So that's where you cut a little zigzag, and that will reduce the fraying. If you don't do that, when you go in the washing machine, it's going to come out in all sorts of pieces because it will fray past the stitching line. One of my favourite finishes on the sewing machine is a French seam. I think that's super neat. It looks super neat, and also it's super secure. The next mistake you're making is you are not choosing patterns that are in your personal style. So we all have a personal style. We know the type of clothes we like to wear. Certainly up until recently, I've been someone who likes to wear dresses, like tunic dresses with leggings. That was my go-to style. You've got a style. It might be business casual if you go to work. It might be athletic if you're into sports. But whatever it is, you know what it is, and you use that style because it looks good on you. So if you see a pattern online, maybe a brand is advertising a pattern and they've got someone like displaying that pattern, wearing the dress, I should say, wearing the garment, but they're a very different body size, body shape, body everything to you. You might look at it and think, oh, that is gorgeous, that's amazing, I want that, I want to feel that good, I want to feel that attractive. And then you buy the pattern and make it and then wonder why it didn't look good on you. Well, that's because it's not to your personal style, it's not something you're used to wearing, it's not something that would flatter your body, and it just does not look anything like the model looked. The model looks like that in order to sell copies to people like us who will just buy it and think we can look like that as well. But unless you do actually look like that, you're not going to look like that no matter what clothes you wear. So it's really important that you stick to something that you're going to feel confident in. A lot of garment making and having a successful garment is about confidence, about being able to wear that piece of clothing with confidence and be happy in it. That's going to make your garment look a lot more high end than anything else, any aspirations to wear something else that you might have. So the next mistake that you may be making is that you are judging your own work really, really harshly. It might be that your garment is professional looking, it is a really good piece of work, but you are not seeing that because you are too self-critical. And it might be that you wear it and someone sees you and they say, oh, I love your garment. And you're like, do you really? Because I think it's rubbish. Well, no, you need to really assess whether you are being too self-critical. It might be that your garment's really, really good and looks really good, but you're not happy with your own self-image, which is causing you to think that it's a bad garment. We do often reflect and like to blame other things other than the thing at source. Maybe consider that your mindset is in a place where you cannot accept that you are sewing really good garments. So with that said, I'm going to leave it here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do hit like, comment, subscribe, all the things, and I will catch you in the next one. Check out this video, what to do if you can't afford a serger, and I'll see you soon. Bye.